The protagonist doesn't know. After I gave birth, I dabbed a bit of rouge behind my daughter's ears. So, when I woke up and found the rouge missing, I knew my daughter had been swapped by the protagonist. I immediately called for my trusted maid, Shen Kui. Go get the cooking oil quickly, spread a circle of it around the outside of the house, and hide these money boxes in the storeroom first. Though Shen Kui was full of questions, she followed my orders immediately. Yes, my lady. She nimbly grabbed the oil jar and poured it carefully along the corners of the wall. As soon as the oil was spread, the next second, I took a fire starter from my sleeve and threw it without hesitation. With a sudden whoosh, the flames instantly flared up. I watched coldly as the tongues of fire greedily licked at the beams, then spoke to Shen Kui behind me. Take that useless child, and let's go. Coincidentally, the protagonist had sent away all the servants in my courtyard today. That saved me quite a bit of trouble. So, under the cover of night, my maid and I hurried toward the protagonist Luo Qinghe's courtyard. As I expected, the massive blaze soon alarmed the entire estate. Then, Luo Qinghe's door was pushed open from the outside. She didn't even have time to put on an outer robe and rushed out in a panic. What? How did Han Yingxue's house catch fire so suddenly? Mother Guo behind her was even more flustered, rushing to wrap a brocade coat around her. Be careful not to catch a cold, madam. But Luo Qinghe couldn't care less about that, stomping her feet in a rush. What are you all standing there for? Go put out the fire. Hearing this, the servants grabbed buckets and basins and dashed toward my courtyard in chaos. Just then, her gaze swept viciously toward the wet nurse in the corner. Why are you still standing there? What are you waiting for? Get over there and help. The nanny looked toward the room in hesitation, but the little master, before she could even finish her sentence, Luo Qinghe cut her off with a sharp shout. What could possibly happen to the little master in there? If you delay the firefighting efforts, I'll make you pay for it. The nanny shivered in fear, daring not to say another word. She quickly grabbed a basin and rushed out. Only then did Luo Qinghe urge her frantically, Mother Guo, hurry and help me over there to take a look. The two of them hurried off as well. In the blink of an eye, the large courtyard was completely empty. Only the lanterns under the eaves remained, casting an eerie light as they swayed in the night breeze. I took Shen Kui, and under the cover of night, we snuck inside without a sound. In the moonlight, I strode into the room. An exquisite carved cradle sat right in the center. My heart instantly jumped to my throat. With trembling fingers, I pulled back the infant's ear, only to find it completely clean. There wasn't a trace of rouge anywhere. Shen Kui lowered her voice, her tone trembling as well. Isn't this our little lady? I forced myself to stay calm and quickly unwrapped the swaddling clothes. By the candlelight, I saw a delicate-looking baby boy instead. Shen Kui was completely panicked. Why is it a baby boy? Is this the child Lady Luo gave birth to today? Then where has our little lady been taken? My heart was in chaos. I wrapped the boy back up and placed him in the cradle, then began to frantically search the room. I believed that Luo Qinghe must have hidden my child elsewhere. Just then, a very faint sound drifted into my ears. The sound was intermittent, like the whimpering of a kitten. I stopped moving abruptly and pricked up my ears to listen closely. Shen Kui leaned in, nervous. My lady, what did you hear? My eyes lit up instantly. I followed the sound and rushed out of the room. The sound was actually coming from the most remote woodshed. I took a deep breath. I shoved open the creaking wooden door. By the moonlight, I saw, on a pile of hay, a rickety, abandoned cradle sitting all alone. A faint movement was coming from inside. My daughter had actually been thrown here. I darted over in a single bound. I picked up the child in the cradle with trembling hands. When I parted her tiny ear, that familiar red rouge mark appeared right before my eyes. Shen Kui was so excited she almost cried out. It really is our little mistress. I immediately gave her a look. Shen Kui finally realized what was happening. With nimble hands, she took the baby girl we had brought with us. We quickly swapped the swaddling clothes and outfits of the two infants. Once this was done, I finally dared to lean down and kiss my daughter's forehead. My eyes turned red in an instant. Strange enough, the daughter who had been crying and restless earlier was now surprisingly quiet in my arms. Before long, she drifted into a deep sleep, as if she knew she had finally returned to her own mother's embrace. Shen Kui looked at the drafty, dilapidated woodshed, trembling with rage. How could they dare treat my lady like this? The night air is so bitterly cold in this place, and they just dumped the child on a pile of straw. If you hadn't discovered it in time, our little mistress would have likely. I gently patted Shen Kui on the shoulder, lowering my voice. Now is not the time to weep while they haven't returned yet. We must leave at once. Shen Kui finally snapped out of it. She nodded hurriedly. She carefully placed the baby girl back into the broken cradle in the woodshed. Then neither of us dared to delay for even a second. Under the cover of the night, we vanished from this man-eating courtyard in an instant. Reflected in the glow of the fire, a scene of chaos unfolded before my courtyard. The servants formed a long line, fumbling as they passed buckets of water, tossing them toward the roaring main house. Water and sparks intertwined, flaring with a blinding light against the night. Lady Hugh stood outside the courtyard with a grim face, her luxurious silk robes snapping in the heat wave. Seeing Luo Qinghe hurry over, she furrowed her brows and stepped forward quickly. Qinghe, you've just given birth. How can you be out in this draft? Go back and rest at once. Luo Qinghe was pale, fine beads of sweat dotting her forehead, yet the urgency in her eyes was truly moving. I heard my sister-in-law's courtyard caught fire, and I simply couldn't set my heart at ease. Her gaze kept drifting toward the fire, her fingers twisting tightly within her sleeves. Her own flesh and blood was still in there. Where is she? Is the child safe? Her voice was filled with unconcealable trembling. Mama Lee, who stood nearby, hurriedly reported, "We noticed the fire as soon as it started. The main house was already empty, so the second mistress and the little lady must have escaped safely." Upon hearing this, Luo Qinghe finally let her tense shoulders relax just a little. Lady Hu, however, snorted coldly, her face full of disgust. What a jinx she is. Giving birth only to burn down a courtyard. Such a perfectly good house, completely ruined now. She scanned her surroundings and said sharply, "With such a disaster, that wicked woman has surely hidden herself away. Are you looking for me, mother?" A cold, clear voice suddenly came from the shadows. Everyone turned to look at the source. I walked slowly into view, holding the swaddled baby. In the moonlight, my face appeared even paler than usual. Shen Kui followed close behind me, carrying an exquisite hand warmer. The smoke was too thick when the fire broke out. I was afraid the baby would inhale it, so I took him to Yuan's courtyard to take shelter. Luo Qinghe's gaze fell upon the carefully wrapped swaddle, and a faint, nearly imperceptible smile curved her lips. Upon seeing me appear, Hugh frowned again with a look of disdain. "How did your courtyard catch fire just like that? Was it because your staff was careless and dropped a spark that set the house ablaze?" "I am not sure myself, mother. But just after giving birth, I discovered that all the maids and nannies in my courtyard were gone. They said they were needed to help elsewhere in the manor. Only Shenkui was here to attend to me, and she couldn't leave my side to patrol the courtyard. I suppose that must be when the spark started." Hugh's expression darkened significantly at these words, as my words implied that her calling the staff away had caused the fire. "This is your second child already. You should be experienced by now. Why would you need so many people to attend to you? There are many chores to manage in the manor daily. Is it not standard practice to reassign some of your staff to help?" Luo Qinghe forced a smile, stepped forward, and steadied Han. "The weather is dry lately, so sparks are easily ignited. As long as my sister-in-law and the baby are safe, that is all that matters. Everything else is trivial." With that, Luo Qinghe turned to me. "Sister-in-law, mother has a difficult time managing the household. Please don't hold it against her. Besides, I also gave birth today. In fact, one doesn't need that many people for a delivery. Too many people only make things chaotic." Hearing this from Luo Qinghe, a faint, subtle smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Seeing that I remained silent and just stared fixedly at her, a ripple of unease and panic stirred within Luo Qinghe. "Sister-in-law, why aren't you saying anything? Were you frightened by the fire?" I smiled, then replied, "I'm fine. I just think what you said makes a lot of sense, sister-in-law. Why didn't I realize that before?" Although Luo Qinghe's words seemed intended to make peace, every sentence was a veiled jab at me for being too calculating, just as I thought. Upon hearing Luo Qinghe's words, mother-in-law's expression toward me grew even more disdainful. "What an utterly uncouth creature. Look at your sister-in-law. You both gave birth today. Why aren't you as reasonable as she is?" I gave a light chuckle. "Mother is right. It is all thanks to your wise management of the household, knowing how to use the right people, delegating tasks effectively, and knowing how to save money for the Marquis's estate. Your daughter-in-law is truly ashamed of her own inadequacy." As I spoke, I looked back at my main quarters, which were nearly burned to the ground. Sigh. It's just a pity. The cost of repairing the main house will likely take another 1,000 taels of silver. As soon as these words were out, mother-in-law's face darkened even further, yet she couldn't find a single fault in what I had said. As they were speaking, the fire in the main house had already been extinguished. Mother-in-law spoke up again. "Both of you have just given birth. Don't just stand here. Go back and rest." Luo Qinghe and I nodded, answering, very well. Mother-in-law frowned as she looked at me. And as for your room, you should find people to have it repaired yourself when the time comes. Mother-in-law's meaning was clear. She wanted me to use my own dowry money to pay for the repairs. Don't even think about using the family's money. After giving these orders, mother-in-law left, supported by her maids and servants. Luo Qinghe looked at the child in my arms, who was sleeping soundly. She felt much more at ease. She feigned weakness and coughed a few times. Since you are fine, sister-in-law, I shall take my leave then. Seeing her act so fragile, I knew she was just putting on a show for me. In my past life, upon learning she was physically weak after childbirth, I had sent countless tonics to her courtyard, nursing her until she was the picture of glowing health. Thinking of this, I found it incredibly ironic. I gently stroked the swaddling clothes of the infant in my arms. You've had a long night, sister-in-law. You should get some rest too. As soon as Luo Qinghe's silhouette disappeared at the end of the corridor, I immediately carried the baby and rushed to my son's quarters. When that familiar carved wooden door was pushed open, a small figure was sitting under the lamp, toying with a wooden puppet. Hearing the movement, Zheng Yuan turned his head. His large, dark eyes were brimming with innocence. Wenner. My eyes instantly reddened. I tremblingly handed the little girl over to Shen Kui. Mother has missed you so much. My tears fell like a broken string of pearls, soaking the clothing on the child's shoulders. Zheng Yuan, barely 2 years old, was somewhat bewildered by this sudden embrace, but he still obediently reached out his small hands and gently patted his mother's back. That familiar scent of milk, that warm touch, it all made my heart feel as if it were being torn by a knife. In my past life, since the accident happened to him, it had been far too long since I'd been able to hold him like this. Mother will surely protect you both in this life. I whispered against my son's soft earlobe, and watch you grow up safe and sound. Although little Yuan could not understand the depth of his mother's words, he sensitively perceived her sorrow. He clumsily wiped the tear tracks from my face with his small hand, and said in a milky voice, Mother, don't cry. Wenner will blow it all better for you. As he spoke, he puckered his small lips and earnestly blew air onto my face. I laughed through my tears and hugged my son even tighter. Mother is fine. It's just that seeing our Wenner being so sensible makes me so happy. Watching her young mistress weeping, Shen Kui stood to the side, her own eyes reddening. She subconsciously clutched the cradle in her arms even tighter, as if doing so could protect this little life that was almost lost. I wiped away my tears, suppressing the surging emotions, and gently played along with Yuan. It wasn't until the night grew deep that I softly coaxed my son to sleep. Only when that small chest rose and fell evenly with his breathing did I reluctantly rise and settle down with my little daughter in the small courtyard next door. Inside the candle-lit room, I gazed at the infant sleeping soundly in my arms, but the thought that this child was nearly swapped out makes my heart feel as if it is being tightly gripped by an invisible hand, especially when I recall that crude cradle in the woodshed, where rough straw chaff even pricked the baby's delicate skin. The moment this thought arises, I shake my head violently, not daring to dwell on it any further. Shen Kui stands to the side, wringing her handkerchief, finally unable to hold back the question in her heart. My lady, how did you think to use rouge to leave a mark? Did you perhaps already know someone would switch the little mistress? My fingertips paused. It was merely a nightmare. I dreamt someone stole my child and replaced her with an imposter. Fearing the nightmare might come true, I decided to be cautious. To think such a thing could happen, Shen Kui gasps, putting her hands together in prayer. It must be the spirits of the Han ancestors, sending a dream to warn you, my lady. Perhaps. I looked toward the moonlight outside the window, my gaze distant. That full moon witnessed my tragic death in a past life, and now it shines upon my rebirth. Shen Kui pats her chest, still shaken. Fortunately, you are clever, my lady. To think of setting that fire. The madam truly fell for it, rushing off with her people to put out the flames. I smile faintly. Of course she was anxious. After all, the one in my room is her own biological daughter. She had to be desperate once the fire started, calling everyone over to put out the blaze. Otherwise, what would happen if her child came to harm? Shen Kui looks puzzled. If the one swapped here is her own daughter, then what about that little young master in her courtyard? I lower my eyes and ponder for a moment, fingertips gently tracing the embroidery on my daughter's swaddling cloth. My voice is so soft, it is as if I am speaking to myself. If my suspicions are correct, that baby boy is likely not her own biological child. The candle flame sputtered and popped, casting flickering shadows across half my face. Luo Qinghe and I married into the Marquis's estate in the same year. I gave birth to a son 2 years ago, while she had yet to conceive. My voice turned icy. Those concubines in the main courtyard were quite capable, bearing children one after another. The status of the eldest son had already been lost to them. If she remained childless, Shen Kui realized in a flash, so she was desperate for a son to secure her position. She then added with confusion, "But what does that have to do with you, miss? Besides, the child you just bore is a daughter. It has everything to do with her." I sneered, a cold glint flashing in my eyes. I suspect she had already had her pulse checked by a physician, knowing full well she was carrying a girl. With the concubines of the main house eyeing her position, she simply had to have a son. Therefore, this child, by any means necessary, had to be a boy, but her own flesh and blood. How could she bring herself to just discard her? Naturally, she had to find a good place to hide her. She would often come to my courtyard to sit, and she must have known I was carrying a daughter. She likely began planning to swap the babies back then. That is why, even though she was not due for another month, the moment she learned I had gone into labor, she hurried to deliver on the very same day. She seized the chance to swap my daughter, making me raise her own daughter as my own, while my daughter was callously tossed into the woodpile by her. My words left Shen Kui in utter shock. "She seemed so affectionate toward you, miss. Yet she harbored such vile intentions in secret. If you hadn't planned ahead, the little miss would have." I pulled my daughter closer to my chest, my fingertips trembling slightly. I remembered that daughter from my previous life, the one who called me mother, yet ended up feeding me poisoned wine with her own hands. They would never have treated my child with any kindness. A surging, monstrous hatred welled up in my eyes. I dug my nails deep into the palms of my hands, with blood seeping out from between my fingers, but I felt absolutely nothing. Before I died in my past life, Luo Qinghe's vicious words still echoed in my ears. "That daughter of yours spent her whole life as a lowly servant in my courtyard, treated worse than a dog. Later, as she grew up looking more and more like you, I simply sold her into the worst dye house. I heard that when she died, there wasn't a single patch of good skin left on her. My lady, your hand." Shen Kui's startled exclamation pulled me back from my memories. I looked down to see my palm had been pierced by my own fingernails. Fresh blood stained the embroidery on my sleeves. Shen Kui hurriedly grabbed some medicinal powder, carefully bandaging my wound. "You have just given birth. You must avoid heavy worrying above all else. Leave everything else until you have recovered." I stared at the white bandages. "Don't worry. I will take good care of myself. Unlike you, your face is all puffed up with anger like a bun. I just can't swallow this injustice, my lady." Shen Kui twisted her handkerchief fiercely. "The first madam acts like a saint in public, and every time you have something good, you think of her. And yet, it truly was casting pearls before swine. Silly girl. Seeing her true colors now is actually a good thing." I gazed at the brightening sky outside the window, a cold, piercing light in my eyes. "There is plenty of time to settle scores." Shen Kui straightened her back, making a solemn vow. "Rest assured, my lady, I would lay down my own life before I ever let those villains touch a single finger on the young miss again." My heart trembled, and I hurriedly reached out to cover Shen Kui's mouth. "Don't talk about dying. That is so unlucky. Death." The word felt like a sharp blade, stabbing deep into my memories. On the day of my daughter's 1-month celebration in my past life, my mother-in-law had 2 gold neck rings crafted, yet she sent them to Luo Qinghe as quarters first to let her choose. It was Shen Kui who had been ordered to fetch them at the time. "Miss? What is the matter with you?" Shen Kui was startled by my strange expression, and quickly reached out to steady my swaying figure. The tragic scene of that day surfaced before my eyes. When Shen Kui's body was pulled from the lake, it was still tangled in water weeds. Those eyes, which had always held a smile, would never open again. Accidental drowning case closed. The authorities hastily declared it an accidental drowning, but Shen Kui was an excellent swimmer. How could she? Back then, I wanted to investigate the truth, but was sharply scolded by who she. Why bring bad luck on such a joyous day? The candle flame popped with a sudden spark, casting my face in deathly pallor. In the end, I could only hold a secret funeral for Shen Kui outside. I even set up a gravestone. Shen Kui's death was just left like that. Thinking about it now, in my past life, Shen Kui must have heard a secret she shouldn't have in Luo Qinghe's room, which is why she was murdered. I looked at this loyal girl before me, tears shimmering in my eyes. "It is getting late. You've been through a whole night of turmoil with me. You should go and get some rest." Shen Kui stubbornly shook her head. "I am not tired, miss. I want to watch over you and the little miss." "You silly girl. I reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. If you collapse from exhaustion, who will take care of us tomorrow? Under the candlelight, Shen Kui's eyes were already turning red, yet she still stubbornly pursed her lips. It wasn't until I feigned anger and glared at her that she reluctantly nodded. Then I will rest in the outer room for a while. Please call for me if you need anything, miss. Only after the sound of Shen Kui's footsteps faded away did I let out a long sigh. I leaned over to gaze at my daughter sleeping in the cradle. The little one unconsciously smacked her soft pink lips, as if she were having a sweet dream. I gently closed my eyes. The harrowing events of this night have finally come to an end. In these last moments before drifting off to sleep, I hold my daughter's tiny hand firmly in my palm and drift off to sleep as well. After recuperating for several days, my health began to improve. Leaning back against the silk-covered cushions on my chaise, I reflected that over these past few days, the tonics, fabrics, and jewelry sent over by the Han family had nearly filled the entire room. New items arrived every single day, as if they were trying to empty out the entire Han estate. I sighed helplessly and said to Shen Kui, "Go tell the messengers to tell my father and mother to stop sending things. If this continues, I'm afraid there won't even be room left in the house." Shen Kui smiled. "Your father and mother are just worried about you, miss. When they heard about the fire in your courtyard, they were terribly anxious. If they weren't worried about disturbing your rest, I'm sure they would have come personally by now." I shook my head. "Never mind. Just put these away for now." "Yes, miss." "Oh, by the way, have the costs for the repairs to the main room been calculated yet?" Shen Kui nodded. "The craftsmen have already looked at it. It will cost roughly over 3,000 taels of silver." I gave a calm nod. "Go and withdraw it from the Marquis's accounts." Shen Kui froze, looking up at me, a flash of surprise in her eyes. I curved my lips slightly and gave her a look of certainty. Shen Kui's eyes brightened, instantly understanding. "I'll go right away, miss." Watching Shen Kui's briskly departing figure, I shook my head gently. I understood perfectly why Shen Kui was so surprised. In my previous life, I never asked the Marquis's household for a single cent, whether it was for repairs to the courtyard or for household expenses. I used my own dowry for everything. Even whenever my mother-in-law or sister-in-law needed money, they would hint at it directly or indirectly, and I would always obediently hand over the funds. But what was the result? I gave them my heart and soul, but in return, I only received my mother-in-law's cold glares and my sister-in-law's mockery, ultimately losing my own life in the process. Living this life over again, I will never commit such foolish acts. The Han family's silver was not blown in by a strong wind. As for the Marquis's residence, it is only natural that the house itself should pay for the repairs. Everything happened just as I expected. Not long after, Shen Kui ran back in a huff, her cheeks flushed bright red, and even her hair bun was coming loose from running. As soon as she entered the door, she couldn't help but stomp her feet. "My lady, I am absolutely furious. I went to the accounts office to draw the money for the repairs, but the steward actually said we should pay for it ourselves. He refused to give me a single cent." Seeing this, I chuckled softly and gestured for her to come closer, handing her a cup of warm tea. "Look at you, running around until you're drenched in sweat. They've long been accustomed to us digging into our own pockets, so naturally they aren't willing to let go easily." Shen Kui took the teacup and drank it all in one breath. "Are we truly going to have to pay for this ourselves?" "Of course not." I stood up gracefully. "Since the accounts office won't pay, we shall go and demand it from my mother-in-law." Shen Kui quickly grabbed a fox fur cloak and draped it over my shoulders, saying with great worry, "For the accounts office to dare refuse us like that, they must have been instructed by the old madam. If we go and demand it like this, I fear that going to ask now is the perfect time." As I stepped out of the courtyard gate, I glanced back at the several older maids standing under the veranda. These were all veteran servants sent over by the Han family, all shrewd and capable, living this life once more. I had written to my maiden home early on to request people. With them watching over the children now, I can finally set my mind at ease. Seeing me head toward the accounting office, Shen Kui was puzzled. "Young mistress," she asked, "the matriarch's courtyard is in the other direction." I didn't stop walking. "We go to the accounting office first." We soon arrived at the office. When Liu Yang, the manager, saw me arrive, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. A look of disdain appeared on his face, and he gave a perfunctory bow. "Second mistress, what business brings you to our accounting office today?" I offered a polite smile. "My quarters caught fire a few days ago, and the main rooms require repairs. I've already had craftsmen look at them, and it will cost 3,000 taels. I sent Shen Kui earlier to collect the funds, but she wasn't able to receive the silver. I found that rather strange, so I came to ask what exactly is going on." Hearing this, Liu Yang put on an expression of extreme difficulty. My respects, second mistress. It isn't that I am unwilling to give you the money, but the thing is, these rooms belong to your own private quarters, so naturally you must pay for these repairs yourself. This has nothing to do with the Marquis's estate. I raised an eyebrow slightly. My quarters have nothing to do with the estate. Is that the rule of the estate, or is that your own opinion, Manager Liu? It is naturally the rule of the estate. The Marquis's estate is a place of high standing. If everyone were like you, second mistress, coming to ask for money for every little thing, would there be any order left at all? I am aware, second mistress, that you come from a merchant background and know little of proper conduct, but now that you have married into the Marquis's estate, you must not bring the petty ways of your old family with you. If others were to find out about this, it would truly be a disgrace to the prestige of the estate. Hearing Liu Yang insult her mistress like that, Shen Kui was ready to explode with anger. She pointed a finger at Liu Yang's nose, ready to lash out, but I stopped her. I maintained a gentle and kind expression, appearing completely unaffected by Liu Yang's sarcastic remarks. Since Steward Liu insists this is the manor's rule, then I shall certainly abide by it. I won't disturb you any further with your duties, Steward Liu. With that, I took Shen Kui and walked away. As we reached the doorway of the accounts office, I turned back to glance at Liu Yang one more time. Since Steward Liu says the manor shouldn't pay for the repairs, I hope you will hold firm to your principles and make sure not to change the rules so easily. After dropping these words, I led Shen Kui away. Liu Yang watched the two leave and let out a cold snort. What a joke. A lowly merchant's daughter thinks she can come here and nag me? At that moment, several servants from the accounts office gathered around Liu Yang with fawning expressions. Brother Liu is truly something else. 2 sentences from you and the second madame was too scared to even talk back. Brother Liu is worthy of being Brother Liu. So imposing indeed. I think the second madame came here personally just to throw her title around, but in the end she still left just as dejectedly as her maid. So what if she married into the Marquis's manor? Doesn't she still reek of copper coins? All she knows is opening her mouth to ask for money. Seeing that I wasn't the least bit angry, Shen Kui was furious. My lady, that Liu Yang went too far. A mere servant dared to call you a merchant's daughter who doesn't know the rules in front of everyone. And you aren't even angry. You may not be angry, but I am. I wanted to argue with him, but you stopped me. The people in this household only judge based on status. If we just let it go today, everyone will be climbing all over us in the future. No, I have to go back and have it out with him. I smiled and pulled Shen Kui back. My dear Shen Kui, don't get yourself so worked up. Your mistress isn't a paper tiger. Just come along with me and you'll see. Go where? Didn't I just say? To see my mother-in-law, of course. Seeing my mysterious expression, Shen Kui's confusion only deepened. Although she didn't understand what her mistress was planning, she still followed closely behind me obediently. We soon arrived at the entrance of Lady Hu's courtyard. Nanny Li, who was guarding the gate, immediately reached out to stop us. Why has the second mistress come at this hour? I wore a perfectly measured, faint smile on my lips. Isn't old Madame Liu from the Ministry of Rights paying a visit today? A few days ago, my mother-in-law personally came to my quarters to instruct me, telling me I must come over to serve today. I said, glancing toward the courtyard. It should have been a while since she arrived by now, right? Seeing me speak with such conviction, and recalling that the old madam often summoned the second mistress to instruct her on proper decorum, Nanny Li stepped aside to let me pass. Once inside the courtyard, I led Shen Kui quickly toward the main house. Inside the room, Lady Hu was chatting and laughing with old Madame Liu of the Ministry of Rights. My sister-in-law, Luo Qinghe, was leaning affectionately against her mother. To the left and right of old Madame Liu sat her own daughter-in-law and daughter. The whole room was filled with cheer. I paused at the threshold, and looking at this heartwarming scene, I curled my lips into an almost imperceptible sneer. The next second, I burst into loud sobs and stumbled into the room. Mother-in-law, you must seek justice for your daughter-in-law. The sudden wailing cries startled all the ladies in the room as they turned their heads. Seeing me burst in such an unseemly state, Lady Hu's face, which had been beaming with smiles, turned as dark as ink. Before the servants could react, I had already thrown myself at Lady Hu's feet and knelt down heavily with a thud. My hands gripped her skirt tightly. What kind of behavior is this? What kind of behavior is this? Crying and wailing like this? Do you have no sense of decorum left? Lady Hu scolded sharply, all the while trying hard to pull my hands away. But those slender fingers gripped her skirt like iron pincers. and would not let go. I looked up, my small face tear-stained, my eyes red and swollen, tears rolling down like pearls from a broken string. Mother-in-law, a few days ago, a fire broke out in my courtyard, and the main room was burnt to the ground. I wanted to repair the room, so I had Shen Kui go to the accounts office to request the silver. But Steward Liu, At the mention of this sad part, I choked up suddenly, unable to continue, as if I had suffered the greatest injustice. A small matter like repairing a house could have been discussed directly with the accounts office. Why make such a scene? Lady Hu suppressed her rage, repeatedly signaling to me with her eyes, urging me to stop while I could. Yet, I acted as if I were completely oblivious to her hints, and instead cried even louder. After the fire that night, you, mother, specifically instructed me to take charge of the repairs. I have kept your instructions in mind ever since. But Steward Liu refused to provide the silver, and said that my courtyard has nothing to do with the Marquis's estate, and that the repair costs must come out of my own pocket. He said this is the rule of the estate. The more I spoke, the sadder I became, eventually breaking down in tears upon Lady Hu's lap. Lady Hu's face darkened as if it could drip ink, with veins throbbing at her temple. Her intention that night was for me to pay for the repairs myself, not for me to decide the details of the work. Why is this Han Yingxue so foolish to actually make a scene before her now? There were guests sitting in the room. Is this Han Yingxue blind? She suppressed the fury in her heart and forced out through gritted teeth, "Nonsense. You must have misheard." I too thought Shen Kui had misheard at first, so I personally went to the accounts office to ask. Steward Liu said the same thing to my face. "If you do not believe me, mother, you may summon him here to confront me." The more I spoke, the more distraught I became, tears falling like beads from a broken string. Ever since I entered the Marquis's estate, I have never used a single cent from the estate for my own living expenses. From the moment Wenner was born, even his diapers were bought with my own money. During this recent childbirth, even the midwife was hired by my maiden family. I know my background is humble, and I have never dared to violate the rules of the estate. That is why I have never dared to draw money from the accounts office, and I don't even know where the door to the accounts office is. But the expenses for raising 2 children are simply too high. My husband's salary has always been handed over to the Marquis estate. For the silver required to repair the main house this time, I am truly stretched beyond my means. I was left with no other choice but to seek funds from the accounts office. Who would have thought that the office would offer excuse after excuse and refuse to release a single penny? Now, I have no choice but to take my newborn daughter and cram into my son's tiny courtyard. I am truly at the end of my rope, which is why I dare to beg mother to make a decision. Madame Liu from the Ministry of Justice and her female kin, upon hearing this, all wore expressions of subtle discomfort on their faces. What I had said was truly shocking. A prestigious Marquis estate actually forcing a daughter-in-law to pay out of her own pocket to raise her children. If word of this got out, wouldn't it be a laughingstock? Seeing me reveal the estate's shortcomings in front of the guests, Madame Hu's face darkened like water. She slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Enough of your nonsense. The Marquis estate's monthly allowance has always been distributed on time. How could we have ever shorted any courtyard even a single bit? Since the day I married into the Marquis estate, I have always strictly fulfilled my duties. How would I dare to speak even half a lie? Just now, when I took Shen Kui to the accounts office, the estate servants saw it all clearly. Even the merchants who came to collect payments witnessed it with their own eyes. Manager Liu claimed in front of everyone that this is the rule of the house. Furthermore, all expenses and outgoings have detailed records in the accounts office to be verified. If I have uttered even one untruth, I am willing to be struck down by lightning and suffer a wretched death. Do you think a wicked oath will make people believe you? Mother has managed the household affairs for many years. When has she ever mistreated any courtyard's needs? You dare to slander the Marquis estate for withholding silver? You are simply spouting nonsense. You truly are a merchant's daughter reeking of copper, talking about nothing but money all day long. Being able to marry into our Marquis estate is already a blessing from your ancestors. You burned down your own courtyard through carelessness, so who can you blame? You should be paying for these repair costs yourself. By what right would you touch public funds? And you even dare to make a scene in front of mother. Do you have no shame left? Her fierce and aggressive demeanor caused the ladies of the Liu family to knit their brows in unison, especially Madame Liu's daughter-in-law. She too was born to a merchant family. She had not expected Luo Qinghe, who spoke to her so kindly just moments ago, to hold such disdain for women of merchant backgrounds. Could it be that the gentle and kind demeanor Luo Qinghe displayed earlier was all an act? Besides, Han Yingxue is Luo Qinghe's sister-in-law, after all. How could Zheng Qingye address her so casually and speak so disparagingly of her own sister-in-law's social standing? The expressions of Lady Lu's female relatives toward Zheng Qingye grew cold with subtle disapproval. Seeing her precious daughter behave so ungraciously, Lady Hu immediately grabbed Zheng Qingye's sleeve and shot her a fierce warning glare. Only then did Zheng Qingye suddenly realize that guests were present. The sight of my aggrieved expression had ignited her fury earlier, causing her to forget the occasion. Now, sensing the questioning, frowning gazes of those around her, her face burned with embarrassment. She hurried to silence herself and hid behind Lady Hu. Lady Hu managed a strained smile and patted Zheng Qingye's hand lightly, her tone reprimanding yet laced with a subtle warning. "You child. How can you be so impatient? Mother knows your heart is filled with filial piety, but before so many distinguished guests, even if your second sister-in-law spoke some falsehoods regarding money, you should not have been so discourteous as to contradict your sister-in-law in public." This remark appeared to be a scolding of her daughter, but in reality every word was aimed at me. "Mother, you have managed the Marquis's estate day and night, keeping everything in perfect order. How could you ever cut short my second sister-in-law's monthly allowance? What my second sister-in-law said just now is truly unfair, and I spoke without thinking, out of sheer agitation. Mother, please forgive me." Lady Hu nodded in satisfaction, then turned her gaze toward me, still kneeling on the floor. "Get up quickly. You gave birth only a few days ago, and your body is still weak. How can you endure kneeling like this, even if you are anxious about money? You should prioritize your own health." Watching the mother and daughter play their scripted parts, I sneered inwardly, yet appeared all the more fearful on the outside. "Mother, I did not know we had honored guests today. Coming here so abruptly was indeed a breach of etiquette, but mother, you have truly misunderstood me. If I were truly only concerned with money, I would not have waited until today to speak up." I glanced back at Shen Kui. Shen Kui immediately produced a stack of account books and respectfully presented them. "I feared that you, mother, would not believe me, so I brought the account books for my courtyard from these past few years. Every expense is recorded clearly and accurately. Everything I have said is the absolute truth. If I were not truly in a difficult financial position, why would I shamelessly come to the manor to ask for funds?" Seeing that I remained persistent, despite knowing there were guests present, Lady Hu's expression turned even uglier. Deep down, she hated that this merchant's daughter was so oblivious to social graces. When she saw the account books that Shen Kui had presented, her face turned cold as stone. She was well aware that I had been paying out of my own pocket all these years, but at this moment she had to pretend she knew nothing. She forced herself to take the books and leaf through them. "Although I come from a merchant family, and I do deal with money matters daily, I would never speak carelessly regarding financial affairs. Every single expense in these books is recorded clearly. The funds I had on hand should have lasted until the shops settled their accounts at the end of the year. But a few days ago, Sister Qingye purchased many rare medicinal herbs and jewelry, especially that 1,000-year-old ginseng from the Jubao Pavilion, and those 2 jade jewelry sets which were the most expensive. They exhausted the cash I had on hand all at once." As soon as these words left my mouth, Zheng Qingye's face turned deathly pale. She stood up abruptly, her voice sharp and shrill. "You're talking nonsense. Those were clearly things you insisted on giving me." "Qingye." Lady Hu hurriedly tried to stop her, but it was too late. These words from Zheng Qingye were tantamount to admitting in public that she had indeed used my money. At that moment, the expressions of the ladies from the minister's manor became subtle. When Zheng Qingye visited their home a few days ago, she had presented Lady Lu with a 1,000-year-old ginseng and gave Lady Lu's daughter and the young mistress each a set of jade jewelry. Who could have guessed that these expensive gifts were all bought with the private funds of the Marquis's daughter-in-law? And what was even more ironic was that, to show their gratitude, the Luo family, they even sent back generous gifts of equal value. Looking at it now, it seems as though Zheng Qingye simply took advantage of them. If it were truly a gift from her sister-in-law, as Zheng Qingye claims, it would be highly improper for her to turn around and give such valuable items away. That is hardly the conduct befitting a lady of noble standing. Madame Hu's fingers gripping the ledger were trembling slightly. She suppressed her boiling rage, but had to maintain a dignified and composed expression, seeing me so relentless. Madame Hu knew that if she didn't provide an explanation today, I would not let this matter rest easily. "Yingxue, my dear, please get up." Madame Hu forced a maternal smile, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "You've only just given birth a few days ago. Your health is at its most fragile. How can you endure kneeling like this? Let's stand up and talk about this slowly. Every word your daughter-in-law has spoken is the truth. I beg mother to see the truth. Of course mother believes you. Get up and take a seat so we can talk." As Madame Hu spoke, she turned toward Lady Lu, her face filled with an apologetic smile. I am truly embarrassed that Lady Lu had to witness this today. I suspect some treacherous servants in our household have caused this misunderstanding. Lady Liu held her teacup and gave a meaningful smile. It is no matter, no matter. What household doesn't have a few restless servants? Just punish them and it will be settled. Our Marquis's household is one of strict decorum. We would never allow our daughter-in-law to live off her private funds. There must be some black-hearted servants who conspired and embezzled your monthly allowance. She sighed. You child, you are simply too honest. You've suffered through these grievances for years. Why did you only think to tell mother today? I knew full well that Madame Hu was trying to pin the blame on the servants, so I did not expose her and simply lowered my head to respond obediently. It is my fault, coming from a merchant family and not understanding the rules of the Marquis's household, that I have been deceived by these treacherous servants for so many years. It is my fault for being foolish. I have caused mother worry. Go. Drag Steward Liu from the accounts office here. The old servant obeys. Mama Li bowed in agreement. She hurried out. Before long, Liu Yang was dragged in, his arms held by two burly housemaids. He knelt on the ground, trembling with fear, his forehead pressed tightly against the cold floor tiles. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. You audacious, wicked servant. There was a fire in the second mistress's courtyard, and the main building needed repairs. A few days ago, I explicitly ordered the funds for the second mistress's repairs to be released. You dog of a servant dared to disobey my orders in secret, and embezzled the repair funds for your own gain. Hearing this, Liu Yang trembled all over. His face turned deathly pale in an instant. He remembered clearly that the person sent by the old mistress had specifically instructed him not to release any funds for the second mistress. How had it become his crime now? Old mistress, please see the truth. I only acted according to your instructions. I never embezzled a single copper. How insolent. Mama Li kicked Liu Yang on the shoulder, knocking him sideways to the ground. Even now, you dare to falsely accuse your master? Lady Hu spoke up at the right moment, her tone chilling. If Yingxue hadn't tearfully complained today, I wouldn't have known that for all these years she has lived in this manner. She has been living off her own dowry. You wicked servant. Seeing that my daughter-in-law is soft-natured, you dared to bully your mistress and defy authority. Now that the evidence is conclusive, do you still dare to quibble? Must I really enforce the family rules in front of all these noble ladies? Liu Yang looked up in terror, only to discover the hall was full of distinguished guests. When his gaze landed on me, sitting quietly to the side, he felt as if he had fallen into an icy abyss. He finally realized that he had been pushed out by the old mistress as a scapegoat. Cold sweat instantly soaked the clothes on his back. Liu Yang collapsed on the ground, his face ashen, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. He knew that today this scapegoat he would have to shoulder, whether he liked it or not. Liu Yang's eyes darted frantically, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He suddenly kowtowed several times, the sound of his head hitting the floor echoing sharply in the hall. I was wrong, mistress. I was wrong. You always taught us to be frugal with the household expenses, and I misunderstood your intentions, thinking I should save wherever I could. Please, I beg for mercy. I wiped the corner of my eyes with my embroidered handkerchief. What a brazen servant. Still trying to talk your way out of this. The accounting office has detailed records for every month's expenses. Since you claim this was all for the sake of frugality, why not fetch the account books and check them right now? Let's see if the whole household was being frugal, or if my courtyard was the only one being shortchanged. Liu Yang's face turned deathly pale at these words. His clothes soaked instantly with cold sweat. For years, the expenses for my courtyard never went through the public accounts, and he hadn't even bothered to forge the records. If an audit were to happen now, the truth would be exposed immediately. He looked at me in terror, finally realizing what kind of ruthless opponent he had provoked. In those teary, beautiful eyes, there was clearly a murderous intent aimed at his life. Lady Hu's expression shifted instantly, her teacup clattering loudly as she slammed it onto the table. If a real audit were to take place, the Marquis's household would be disgraced. Enough, Liu Yang. You are but a servant, yet you dared to make decisions for your master. What incredible audacity. Summon, drag him out and give him 80 heavy strikes. Cast him out of the household immediately, never to be employed again. Have mercy, my lady, please. I've served you for so many years. Mother Li was quick to react, grabbing a cloth and stuffing it into Liu Yang's mouth. She signaled to the attendants, and two burly men immediately grabbed Liu Yang, dragging him out as if he were a dead dog. Lady Hu forced a smile as she looked at me. My dear child, if you have any issues in the future, just come to Mother. Don't keep everything bottled up inside. Your daughter-in-law thanks you for upholding justice, Mother. Go back and rest now. Exertion is to be avoided during your confinement. Lady Hu suppressed her rage and advised me gently. Then, as for my monthly allowance from these past years, and the funds for renovating my courtyard, Lady Hu's mouth twitched violently. She took a deep breath and forced out the words, just go to the accounts office to draw them. Since you are a daughter-in-law of this Marquis's estate, it is only natural for the estate to provide for you. Thank you for your consideration, Mother. I shall take my leave. I leaned on my maid's arm and walked away gracefully. The sight of me walking away made Lady Hu's chest tighten with frustration. If there weren't outsiders present, she would have wanted to tear me apart. As soon as we left Lady Hu's courtyard, Shen Kui couldn't help but grip the ledger tightly. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement. She looked left and right to ensure no one was around, then lowered her voice. My lady, you are truly brilliant. Not only did you get back the money, but you also made that dog in the manger Liu Yang pay. I curled the corners of my lips upward, my fingertips gently stroking the pearl flower by my temple. A flash of cunning crossed my eyes. Of course, aside from the 100 taels of silver per month, there are many things we can draw from the accounts office daily. Now that Mother has said it herself, it is only right for me to rely on the estate now that I'm married in. Naturally, the extra expenses for me and the child can be drawn as well. Shen Kui's eyes brightened remarkably upon hearing this, clutching the ledger to her chest as if it were a rare treasure. Suddenly remembering something. My lady, how did you know you would succeed today? The old madam is usually so stingy with you, yet she was so agreeable today. I let out a soft laugh. Of course I knew today was different, because on this day in my past life was the day the minister's household visited the Marquis' estate for a matchmaking. Lady Liu is the matriarch of the Minister of Revenue's house. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Their family reputation is upright and pure. The eldest son is young and already a major general in the military. Although his wife comes from a merchant family, they have never been mistreated by his family. The second son passed the imperial examinations and was the most sought-after top scholar of the previous exam cycle. He has now entered the bureaucracy, and his future is surely boundless. The youngest daughter is well-read and sensible, long known as a talented woman. Lady Hu had long set her sights on the minister's children. Not only did she want to marry her daughter to the minister's top scholar son, she also wanted to bring the minister's young daughter home to be a wife for her own youngest son. In my previous life, though she didn't succeed in getting the minister's daughter, she successfully married Luo Qinghe into the Qin family. As a result, after Luo Qinghe married in, she turned the minister's estate completely upside down. She not only drove her own sister-in-law to her death, but also ruined the young sister-in-law's reputation, who ultimately ended her days alone with only a cold lamp and a Buddha. It even caused the high-spirited top scholar to fall into despair. Once she had ruined the minister's household, she just brushed off her hands and got a divorce, only to return to the Marquis's house to torment me. Therefore, I chose to cause a scene with my mother-in-law today, because I knew that with Lady Liu present, Lady Hu would have to pretend to be kind and magnanimous, and Luo Qinghe would have to pretend to be obedient and well-behaved. They certainly wouldn't dare bully me in front of others. They would surely swallow their pride. My calculation was precise. Getting back the money I am rightfully owed. Having lived this life again, no one will ever take advantage of me again. Although I used Lady Liu to some extent, I also helped the minister's household. After the commotion today, the women of the minister's household will surely see that their mother-in-law and sister-in-law are not as good as they appear. Perhaps this marriage will not proceed as it did in my past life. Luo Qinghe does not deserve to marry into such a fine family. With guests present, my mother-in-law will naturally keep her temper in check. All right, let's walk a bit faster. The silver is waiting for us. Yes, my lady, in less than an hour. Shen Kui was looking through the ledger with the accountant, checking the entries with a serious expression. When the accountant saw that I still intended to collect the silver recorded in the book, he looked visibly troubled. What is wrong? Can it not be cashed out? How about this? You come with me to see my mother-in-law again, steward. I'll ask her again right in front of you. to see what exactly cannot be cashed out. Upon hearing this, the steward couldn't help but tremble. They had all just witnessed Steward Liu being dragged to the outer courtyard to be beaten with a staff. It was such a bloody and terrifying scene. He had no desire to experience that himself. No. It can be cashed out. I'll just record it here. Within the time it takes to burn 2 incense sticks, a trunk of silver was placed before me. Shen Kui stepped forward and tried to lift it. Too heavy. She couldn't move it. Steward, please arrange for 2 servants to carry this trunk back to my quarters for me. Yes, second madam. Shen Kui supported me as we walked ahead, with the servants carrying the silver following behind. Many servants in the courtyard witnessed this scene. Everyone began to look at me in a different light. This second madam, who was usually so soft-spoken, could be truly ruthless, the kind who wouldn't hesitate to take a life. Looking at the heavy load of silver behind us, Shen Kui's initial excitement gradually faded into faint worry. My lady, now that we've taken so much silver from the Marquis' estate, won't the old madam come to cause trouble for us later? She loves to harp on about rules and decorum more than anything. And there is also Miss Qinghe. She is always making snide, insulting remarks toward you. Won't she come to give you a hard time again soon? I let out a soft laugh. If we don't take this silver, will they stop coming after us? Shen Kui shook her head. Even when we didn't take the silver, they still couldn't tolerate you, my lady. Then that settles it. Whether we take it or not, they will always find fault with us. In that case, why shouldn't we take back the silver that is rightfully ours? Upon hearing my words, Shen Kui nodded thoughtfully. Back at our small courtyard, I went straight to check on my infant daughter. Seeing my daughter sleeping soundly in her cradle, my heart melted with tenderness. Just then, a matron from the courtyard entered and bowed. My lady, the first lady sent someone over just a moment ago. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, what did she want? It didn't seem to be anything in particular. They just said the first lady was pale, couldn't stop coughing, and was feeling very weak. Seeing that you weren't in the courtyard, they left. My hand, which was rocking the cradle, paused. A faint smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Luo Qinghe is fishing for my sympathy. In my past life, she did the exact same thing. She'd send someone to my courtyard to say how poor her health was and how pale she looked. Upon hearing that she was unwell, I would take various tonics to her courtyard, restoring her to the picture of glowing health. Mother. A soft, sweet voice pulled me back from my memories. I looked up and saw Yuan. I leaned forward and gently stroked Yuan's hair, looking at my child. I felt my heart melt completely. I'm right here, mother's darling. Why are you such a sleepyhead? You've only just gotten up after the sun is already high up. Mother, pick me up. Yuan reached out his arms, wanting to be held. I was about to lift Yuan up, but the matron beside me stopped me. My lady, you will have plenty of time and strength to hold the young master later. Right now, you have just given birth. You must not overexert yourself. Go back to bed and rest immediately. Do not wander about like this anymore. As she said this, the nurse began to coax Zheng Yuan. Mother just gave birth to your little sister, so she needs to rest properly now. Let's not disturb mother. Once mother is feeling better, we can come back and play with her. All right? Zheng Yuan nodded obediently. He allowed the nurse to carry him out. Seeing Wenner being so well behaved, my heart melted even more. I wanted to spend more time with my child, but was firmly guided back to bed by the 2 nurses. The people sent by my lady mother are truly capable. They keep my lady under such tight control. Meanwhile, back with Lady Hu. After I left, she had still wanted to discuss the marriage between their children with Lady Liu. But Lady Liu was suddenly struck by a dizzy spell. In the end, she had no choice but to watch the ministry officials' family leave the Marquis' estate. Mother, you were brilliant. I didn't know you could fake dizziness. Otherwise, who knows how much more time we would have wasted at the Marquis' estate. Inside the carriage on the way back, Lady Liu showed no signs of the dizziness she had just feigned. She looked completely fine. I had thought the old madam of the Marquis' estate was as kind and generous as people say, but I never expected her to be so two-faced. If we hadn't been there earlier, I doubt she would have been so mild-tempered. And that Zheng Qinghe, the way she spoke to her sister-in-law just now, I suspect that so-called obedience was all just an act for our benefit. Mother, please don't marry me off to that estate. Being a daughter-in-law there means using your own money to survive, and even fixing the house yourself if it falls into disrepair. It's simply absurd. Lady Liu tapped Qin Keqing's nose with a helpless smile. After seeing all of this, I certainly won't be forming a marriage alliance with the Marquis' estate, nor will I let you get dragged into this mess. Meanwhile, In Lady Hu's inner courtyard, the moment Lady Liu left, Zheng Qinghe shook off Lady Hu's hand. She looked at Lady Hu with dissatisfaction. "Mother, why did you hold me back? Didn't you see Lady Liu was feeling faint? How could I, as her future daughter-in-law, just stand by? I should have gone up to support her as she left. Wasn't it you who told me to act obedient and sensible? What feeling faint? Can't you see that Lady Liu was just faking it?" She clearly used that as an excuse to leave. Upon hearing this, Zheng Qinghe's expression darkened even more. Faking it? Why would she fake being faint? Could it be she doesn't want to marry into our Marquis's household anymore? I've spent all this time trying to build a reputation for you as obedient and sensible. And had you approached the women of the Liu family to leave a good impression, everything was supposed to go smoothly. The match might have even been settled after today's meeting. Who would have expected this to happen? The women from the Ministry of Rights are naturally suspicious. That is why they cut the meeting short and left early. They must want to go back and inquire more about our household situation. Then, what do we do? What if they decide they don't want the marriage after all? I don't care. I must marry their champion scholar. I am going to marry him. Enough. Nothing is settled yet. Don't you worry just yet. Our Marquis's household has always had a sterling reputation. How could a small matter like this affect a marriage proposal? Besides, it has already been cleared up that it was that servant Liu Yang who was embezzling. What does that have to do with our household? Zheng Qinghe scoffed. That low-born wretch, Han Yingxue. She just had to pick today to come and make a scene. If she ruins my marriage prospect, I will never forgive her. Lady Hu's gaze sharpened. She's always been so obedient. She never dared to question a word I said. Yet today, she dared to cause trouble in my courtyard, and it just happened to be while I had guests. I wonder if she calculated that I wouldn't punish her today. Mother, are you saying she knew in advance we were meeting the Ministry of Rights family today, and came here specifically to make this scene? Seeing Lady Hu think so, Zheng Qinghe looked dismissive. Mother, you are overthinking this. You give her too much credit for intelligence. If she were actually clever, would she have gone years without a monthly stipend without saying a word? If you ask me, she probably really didn't have much cash on hand, and her rooms were in urgent need of repair, so she got desperate and had the nerve to come to your courtyard to beg you. Lady Hu nodded, finding Zheng Qinghe's words somewhat reasonable. Who knows if this scene today will affect the Liu family? She really is a jinx. A curse upon our Marquis estate. So what if she took a bit of money? We can just find a way to take it back from her later, can't we? I don't care. Mother, you must find a way to finalize my marriage to the top scholar. I must marry into the minister's household. All right. We are, after all, a Marquis estate, a prestigious household. Nothing is set in stone yet. What if Lady Liu really was just feeling dizzy, even if she was faking it? Once she returns home and considers the benefits of an alliance with our estate, she might just come forward to propose the marriage. Let's not be hasty. Just wait and see. As the mother and daughter were talking, an old maid came from outside to report. Old Madam, the head of the accounting office, requests an audience. After the manager came in and finished his report, the faces of Lady Hu and Zheng Qinghe turned ghastly green. Furious, Lady Hu slammed the table and stood up. You let her take 15,000 taels of silver. The manager, terrified, immediately knelt on the ground. Old Madam, the second madam brought the ledger to us for withdrawal, claiming it was your intent, Old Madam. She said there was no need to cash out the entire ledger. Just pick out a few urgent items to settle, excluding the 3,000 for house repairs and nearly 4,000 in overdue stipends from the last 3 years. There were also the expenses for items and costs the second madam incurred raising the young master. When added up, it came to 15,000 taels of silver. Lady Hu's face turned livid, and the handkerchief in her hand was crumpled out of shape. She suppressed the anger in her heart and waved her hand. Go on then. The steward scrambled away, tripping over himself in his haste. Once the steward had left, Zheng Qinghe smashed the teacup by her side in a fit of rage. That hussy, to think she managed to walk away with 15,000 taels of silver at once. Who does she think she is? By what right does she use the Marquis's estate funds? This wretched woman really knows how to seize an opportunity to reach for money. No. I am going to get that money back. Someone like her doesn't deserve to enjoy the benefits of our Marquis estate. Zheng Qinghe stomped out, seething with anger as she spoke. Lady Hu hurriedly grabbed her. Don't make a scene. The monthly allowance and repair costs are things the Marquis estate should be paying for anyway. If you blow this out of proportion and word gets out, what will become of our estate's reputation? Zheng Qinghe sat back down fuming. Then, what are we to do? Are we just going to sit by and watch her take advantage of us? I, for one, cannot do that. Lady Hugh let out a cold laugh. Your mother would certainly never let her profit at the expense of our estate. Hearing Lady Hugh say this, Zheng Qinghe's expression softened slightly. Mother, do you already have a plan to deal with her? Naturally, I do. A cold glint shone in Lady Hugh's eyes. Neither she nor her child will ever get away with profiting from our estate. Hearing Lady Hugh mutter to herself, Zheng Qinghe, impatient, stepped forward and nudged her. Mother, what are you saying? What is your plan? Hurry and tell me. Lady Hu patted Zheng Qinghe's hand. Naturally, we will take back double what she took. Then Lady Hu leaned in and whispered in Zheng Qinghe's ear. Upon hearing Lady Hu's plan, Zheng Qinghe's eyes lit up. Her sullen face from earlier instantly turned triumphant. Life continued on this way. A few more days passed by in the blink of an eye. For these past few days, I was forced by a few of the older maids to stay in bed and recover. They wouldn't let me go anywhere. I had no choice but to be obedient. After resting for a few days, my complexion has become much more radiant. On this day, when Luo Qinghe was helped over by her maids and matrons, I was reclining on a soft lounge chair, chatting with Mother Qi, whom my family had sent specifically to manage my postpartum diet. Between the pigeon soup and the stewed bird's nest, how could I possibly drink all these liquids in a single day? I pushed away the bowl of bird's nest being offered to me with a helpless expression. Miss, a woman drains her vitality when she gives birth. If you don't build your strength back up during your confinement, you'll be left with lasting ailments. Before we left, the madam gave us strict instructions that we must take excellent care of you. If you don't take proper care of your health, we won't be able to face the madam when we return. I already skimmed the layer of fat off the top of the pigeon soup. It tastes sweet and light, and it certainly won't feel greasy. You'll see once you have a taste. Sigh. All right. And this bird's nest. This is the top-tier bird's nest the madam bought especially for you. A single bowl alone costs 20 taels of silver. It would be a waste if you didn't drink it. All right. Mother Qi, say no more. I'll drink it. Won't that satisfy you? I'll drink it. I'll drink it all. That's the spirit. Finish this bowl of bird's nest first, and I'll go set the pigeon soup aside to keep it warm. You can have it in a little while. Mother Qi handed the bowl to Shen Kuai nearby and stood up to head outside. Only then did Luo Qinghe poke her head out from behind the screen. I, who had long since noticed Luo Qinghe standing behind the wind-blocking screen at the door, pretended as if I had just seen her. Oh, sister-in-law, why have you come over? Come in quickly. Luo Qinghe had a pale little face, and she walked in supported by her maids and matrons. I looked toward the doorway again. Why didn't you have anyone announce you when you entered the courtyard, sister-in-law? Luo Qinghe waved her hand dismissively. It is nothing. It is nothing. I was just afraid of disturbing your rest, so I specifically told them not to announce me. I sneered inwardly. If you were truly worried about disturbing my rest, you shouldn't have come to bother me at all. But now that you are here, putting on such a show of concern for my rest is truly hypocritical. In my past life, I trusted Luo Qinghe too much, never once noticing how unreasonable her actions were. With a smile still plastered on my face, I gestured for her to be seated. Sister-in-law, please have a seat. Very well. Luo Qinghe was helped into a chair beside mine by her maid. Once seated, she began to carefully inspect my room. Although I was only staying here temporarily, the room was fully equipped with every necessity. Take the lounge chair I was reclining on. Its intricate carving was clear to see. Even the quilt covering it was of the finest quality. The charcoal burning in the stove nearby not only emitted no smoke at all, but one could even smell a faint scent of fruitwood. A flash of jealousy crossed Luo Qinghe's eyes. When she had entered, she had heard my servant urging me to drink my tonics. That single bowl of bloodbird's nest cost 20 taels of silver. One must know, the monthly allowance for the entire Marquis's estate is only around 100 taels. The Han family is merely a merchant clan, yet they consume bird's nest as if it were water. Although Luo Qinghe quickly concealed the jealousy in her eyes, I had still caught it. I sneered internally, while my face remained wearing a pleasant expression. Sister-in-law, you are still in your postpartum confinement. Why are you up and walking about? A woman who has just given birth should be resting in bed. Luo Qinghe coughed twice, thinking if I didn't want to come and see my own daughter, I wouldn't step foot in your place, not for all the world. Besides, Last time I sent a servant to inform you that I was feeling unwell, and you didn't even have the sense to send some tonics to my courtyard. Naturally, I had to come and see for myself. That was what she thought, but her face wore a look of worry. It is just that when the fire broke out in your courtyard the other day, sister, I was so frightened. I was deeply worried. I couldn't help but want to come and see you. How have you been these past few days? And the baby, is she doing well? You are very kind, sister-in-law. I am doing very well, and the baby is doing just fine too. Where is the baby? Why don't I see her? She is sleeping in the inner room. Luo Qinghe's eyes flickered. She glanced toward the inner room. A large screen stood there blocking the view. She could faintly see nannies keeping watch inside. Luo Qinghe couldn't help but stand up. She walked in the direction of the inner room. Rounding the screen, she saw a delicately carved cradle inside, where a pink, rosy-cheeked baby was sleeping soundly. The cradle was lined with thick quilts, clearly prepared with the utmost care. Two nannies stood by, guarding the infant. A fine stove was placed by the cradle, keeping the entire room warm with glowing coals. Seeing her own daughter so well cared for, Luo Qinghe pulled a smug smile at the corner of her mouth. She leaned in close to the child. The baby is sleeping so soundly. Her little face is so rosy. How truly adorable. She really looks just like you, sister. The baby is still so young. How could anyone tell who she looks like yet? If you brought your own child here, sister, put them side by side and you probably wouldn't even be able to tell them apart. Luo Qinghe smiled with a flicker of guilt upon hearing this. Her gaze remained fixed on her precious daughter. Watching as Luo Qinghe couldn't resist reaching out to pick up the sleeping infant, I gave a subtle look to the nannies watching over the child. The nanny immediately rose and blocked Luo Qinghe. Madam, you shouldn't pick up the baby while she is sleeping. If she wakes up, it will be hard to get her back to sleep. Luo Qinghe laughed awkwardly at these words. Her outstretched hand paused, and she pulled it back. She felt rather embarrassed. That is true. I just thought the child was so cute. I couldn't help myself and almost picked her up. Seeing Luo Qinghe standing by her daughter's side, unwilling to leave, I truly wanted to laugh. I kept my expression mild and gentle. Sister, you haven't been out of your confinement long. You shouldn't be standing for so long. Why don't you come back over and sit down? Luo Qinghe stared at her daughter, unable to bring herself to move away. The nanny beside her tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "First, madam. The second madam is asking us to go sit over there." Luo Qinghe composed herself. She had no choice but to step out of the inner room. She returned to the main room and sat down. "Yingxue, it's no wonder you've already raised one child. I must say you have truly raised this little daughter of yours well. Her little face is so rosy and plump." I offered an embarrassed smile. "You are too kind, sister-in-law. To be honest, sister-in-law, I have always hoped to give birth to a daughter. Now that I have finally had my wish granted, I naturally have to treasure her like a precious gem. My two sisters-in-law back at my maiden home both gave birth to boys. My parents had been longing for a granddaughter. When they heard I had delivered a granddaughter this time, they were absolutely overjoyed. They send gifts to my courtyard every single day, to the point where I'm running out of space. Even this child's wet nurse was handpicked by my mother. As for the child's cradle, her grandfather spent over 1,000 taels of silver on it. It is made from the finest timber, carved blade by craftsmen brought in from the palace. Upon hearing this, a flicker of jealousy flashed through Luo Qinghe's eyes. She couldn't believe the Han family would treat a married-out daughter so generously. But when she realized that all these benefits would one day belong to her own daughter, the smile on her lips deepened. "It is truly a blessing for this child to have been born to you, sister. To be raised in such luxury from the moment of birth, she is surely destined for a smooth and prosperous life." I sneered internally. Indeed she is. In my past life, Luo Qinghe swapped our children. Her daughter lived an incredibly luxurious life under my care. And in the end, she even built her own happy life by stepping over my dead body. I hope for your kind words to come true, sister-in-law. I too hope that this child leads a peaceful and happy life. Luo Qinghe's eyes darted around. Has a name been chosen for the child yet? I allowed a faint smile to play on my lips. After so much idle chatter, Luo Qinghe is finally getting to the point. We haven't named her yet. Luo Qinghe's eyes lit up. How convenient. When I thought I was carrying a girl, I paid a fortune to have a renowned master calculate some wonderful names. It is just a pity that I gave birth to a young master, so those excellent names are no longer of any use. Since you have just had a daughter, sister, why don't you take a look? See if any of these names catch your fancy. If you like them, feel free to use one. Consider it a first gift from me to the baby. I curled my lips into a faint, amused smile. She had long expected Luo Qinghe to say such a thing, because in my previous life, Luo Qinghe said exactly the same thing. Back then, I was incredibly grateful for her kindness. And in the end, I even adopted the name she suggested. Now that I think about it, Luo Qinghe clearly just wanted to name my daughter herself. She looked down on me, thinking the names I chose weren't good enough for her daughter. Sister, what are you thinking about? Coming back to my senses, I nodded. You are so thoughtful, sister-in-law. I hardly know how to thank you for your kindness. Seeing my reaction, Luo Qinghe felt secretly pleased. She quickly signaled her maid to bring out the pre-prepared list of names. She handed the paper to me. I took the paper, and seeing the names identical to those in my past life, a cold laugh rose within me. Sister, the best name on this list is Baozhu, Zheng Baozhu. Like a pearl and a treasure, it carries such a wonderful meaning, Luo Qinghe said, struggling to hide her impatience. In my previous life, my daughter was indeed named Zheng Baozhu. The daughter I cherished like a pearl and a treasure ultimately ended my life with a cup of poisoned wine. These names are truly lovely. Every single one of them sounds wonderful. I put on a troubled expression. However, what? I handed the paper to Shen Kui and looked at Luo Qinghe with a helpless expression. Sigh. I truly appreciate your kindness, sister-in-law, but my husband said long ago that he wanted to name this child himself. Now that he is away on business, he is away on official business and hasn't returned yet. If I were to bypass him and name the baby early, I fear he wouldn't be pleased upon his return. Hearing this, Luo Qinghe frowned almost imperceptibly. She pondered for a moment and then said, "It is no matter. Sister, you can just keep these names for now and show them to second brother for his reference when he returns. Tell him that I spent a great deal of money to obtain these names and that they all carry particularly auspicious meanings." Seeing that Luo Qinghe was unwilling to let it go, I gave a light laugh. I told Shen Kui to hold on to them for now, and I'll show them to my husband when he gets back. Make sure you remind him to consider the name Baozhu. This name here, it is truly excellent. Luo Qinghe wanted to continue her urging, but Shen Kui interrupted her, holding the bowl of bloodbird's nest up to my lips. Mistress, this bloodbird's nest is getting cold. Why don't you finish it before you continue chatting with the first mistress? I tapped Shen Kui's nose with a helpless smile. You silly girl. Do you really think I would try to dodge drinking it? Then, looking somewhat embarrassed, I turned to Luo Qinghe. Sister, please wait a moment. I'll finish my bird's nest and then we can talk. Go ahead. Don't mind me. Seeing this, Shen Kui began to feed me spoonful by spoonful. Once I finished the bird's nest, Shen Kui carefully wiped my mouth with a handkerchief and gently tucked in my quilt. The nanny nearby immediately brought over 2 warming bags. She tucked one under the quilt at my feet and wrapped the other in an exquisite cloth for me to hold in my hands. Luo Qinghe, who was sitting to the side, wore a smile, but she was clutching her handkerchief tightly. This Han Yingxue truly knows how to enjoy a pampered life. Even her postpartum confinement is so luxurious, with a whole house of people waiting on her alone. All right. I'm not a 3-year-old child. There is no need for you all to crowd around me every day. Go on and tend to your own tasks. Yes. I finished speaking and looked at Luo Qinghe with a smile, avoiding any further mention of the name topic. Sister-in-law, it is so cold out now. And since this is your first time giving birth, you really must focus on recovering your health. When you're in confinement, you absolutely must not walk around. It would be terrible if you caught a chill. Seeing that I was no longer discussing the name, Luo Qinghe found it hard to press the issue further. After all, if she kept fixating on the naming matter, it might eventually invite suspicion, which wouldn't be good. She forced a smile onto her face. Thank you for your concern, sister. My recovery is coming along quite well. No sooner had she finished speaking than Luo Qinghe seemed unable to control herself, lifting her handkerchief to cover her mouth and breaking into a fit of coughing. My lady, you really are something else. You're still in your own confinement, yet you're entirely focused on the second lady's well-being. You insisted on coming over to see the second lady. You really must take care of your own health. That night, second lady, when your quarters caught fire, our lady was already physically very weak postpartum. Upon hearing that something had happened at your residence, she insisted on getting out of bed to come and see you. The air was biting cold that night, and our lady caught a chill. She has been coughing incessantly ever since she returned, and it hasn't improved even now. Once the old servant finished speaking, Luo Qinghe lost her temper. She scolded the servant sharply. Enough of that nonsense. I only just gave birth. My body is just a little weak. What does that have to do with my sister? Saying this, Luo Qinghe looked at me again, with an expression that said, please, don't worry about me. Don't listen to this old woman's ramblings. My health has always been mediocre anyway. Giving birth is like walking through the gates of death all over again. Cough, cough. And now that the weather has turned cold, that is the only reason I'm coughing a bit. Sister, you really don't need to worry about me. After speaking, Luo Qinghe once again covered her mouth with her handkerchief and began to cough. Even while coughing, she kept glancing sideways at me to see how I would react. She thought to herself, since I've made it this obvious, Anyon, who understands human language, should know by now to bring out some tonics to take away for themselves, right? But unfortunately, I don't understand human language. Watching Luo Qinghe put on one performance after another, I wanted to laugh inside, yet my face remained full of concern. Sister-in-law, you are so thoughtful toward me. I am truly deeply touched. You must take good care of yourself, sister-in-law. And you servants are really something. Now that my sister-in-law has caught a cold, you didn't even think to bring her a few hand warmers when you left the house. With that, I handed my own warmer to Shen Kui. I can't get up easily. Shen Kui, hurry and pass my hand warmer to sister-in-law, so she can stay nice and warm. Yes, madam. Shen Kui took the warmer and walked quickly over to Luo Qinghe. Eldest madam, please take this. The warmer will help drive away the cold. Sister-in-law, you brought so much cold air in with you when you arrived. Hurry and warm yourself by the fire. Don't let the chill settle in. Looking at the warmer in her hands and seeing my servants carefully moving the brazier closer to her, the smile on Luo Qinghe's face stiffened. Who said she wanted to warm up by the fire or use a hand warmer? She struggled to maintain the smile on her face. Sister, you are so considerate toward me. I truly don't know what to say. It is nothing at all. Since you care so much about me, it is only right that I treat you well in return. Sister-in-law, take this warmer with you when you leave later. It will keep you warm on the way back. Luo Qinghe's mouth twitched again, and she gripped her handkerchief even tighter. What is wrong with this Han Yingxue? After all this, she only gives me a hand warmer. She knows perfectly well that I am in confinement and need nourishment. How can she be so dull and dense? She doesn't even know to bring me some bird's nest or ginseng. Just then, Mother Qi walked into the room. She stood behind the large folding screen at the door, not coming any further inside. She simply called out, Shen Kui, take the squab soup. She then bowed to me and said, Madam, this squab soup is at the perfect temperature. You should drink it now. I just walked in from outside, and I've picked up some of the chill, so I won't come closer to attend to you. Shen Kui took the warm squab soup, walked over to me, and just as she was about to feed me, I seemed to remember that Luo Qinghe was sitting beside me, recovering from childbirth. I called out to Mother Qi as she was about to leave. Mother Qi, my sister-in-law is also in her confinement period. Why don't you serve her a bowl as well? Mother Qi stopped on her way out, turned around, and said, to ensure the soup wouldn't be too greasy for you, madam, I skimmed off all the fat and managed to brew only this one bowl. Only this one bowl. I frowned and looked at Shen Kui. Shen Kui, why don't you take this and give it to my sister-in-law? Drinking some warm soup will do her good too. Mother Qi intervened. Madam, every woman's body is different, and the diets and tonics for confinement vary as well. These meals and soups have been prepared specifically for your constitution. I noticed the eldest madam looks quite pale and has a persistent cough, so I'm afraid she shouldn't have something as rich as squab soup. Otherwise, her body won't be able to handle the nourishment, and she will end up even more weakened. Is there such a science to it? Yes. I followed your grandmother since I was young, and our family's medicine shop was frequented by many physicians. I've learned quite a lot just by listening and observing over the years. I nodded earnestly. I looked apologetically at Luo Qinghe. Sister-in-law, you came all this way, but all you've done is watch me drink my soup. I truly am sorry. It is no trouble at all. No trouble at all. They prepare nourishing soup suitable for me in my own courtyard every day. This old servant is quite right. Every woman has different nutritional needs while recovering from childbirth. Watching as I was served yet another bowl of soup, Luo Qinghe could barely sit still. What is going on with Han Yingxue? If this were any other time, there would be no need for me to say a word. I would have already taken the initiative to send her all sorts of things. Now that she has just given birth and needs to build back her strength, I haven't shown any sign of support at all. Sister-in-law, you are truly so understanding. It is a blessing for me to have a sister-in-law like you, Yingxue. As I finished, I covered my mouth with a handkerchief and yawned. "Are you tired, madam? Let me help you lie down to rest." Shen Kui, who was nearby, hurried over to remove the soft pillows from behind my back. Seeing me get ready to sleep, Luo Qinghe grew even more anxious. She cast a quick glance around. "I heard that you went to mother-in-law's courtyard to make a scene a few days ago. What on earth could have made someone as gentle as you lose their temper?" I sighed at the question. It wasn't a major issue, really. My courtyard caught fire a few days ago, and the main building was burned to the ground. Repairs require silver. So I had Shen Kui go to the accounts office to draw 3,000 taels, but Steward Liu refused to provide it, claiming that the Marquis's household rules dictate we must pay for repairs ourselves. I felt that Steward Liu was intentionally making things difficult for me, so I went to see mother-in-law, asking her to provide me with justice. Although she had already inquired about what happened, hearing me say it with my own lips left Luo Qinghe feeling quite surprised. This Han Yingxue had always used her own money and never dared to ask for anything from mother-in-law. That she actually dared to cause a scene at mother-in-law's courtyard this time was truly inconceivable. Luo Qinghe could not help but ask, "You have never been willing to ask the accounts office for money before, let alone go and discuss such things with mother-in-law. Why would you make such a big scene this time? I was truly worried for you when I heard the news. I didn't want to bother mother-in-law with such trivial matters, but now that I have 2 children to provide for, the expenses are simply too great. Plus, the building was burned for no reason, and my shops won't settle their accounts until the end of the year, so my funds have become a bit tight." I let out a helpless sigh. My little daughter was just born, and I am overjoyed. I want to give her the very best. Now that she has to be squeezed into this small courtyard, I feel like I'm failing her. I want to move back to my own courtyard as soon as possible, which is why I thought to ask the accounting office for the repair funds. I never expected Steward Liu to have such a terrible attitude. I couldn't stand the injustice, so I gathered the courage to go see mother. Upon hearing this, Luo Qinghe understood everything in an instant. A playful smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. It seems Han Yingxue truly dotes on her daughter. For the sake of her daughter, she actually dared to go ask mother for money. Luo Qinghe felt her scheme of swapping the daughters was absolutely brilliant. And what did mother say? Mother naturally believed me. She had Steward Liu taken away, and after 50 strokes he was driven out of the house. Furthermore, it was only this time that I learned the household actually had monthly allowances for me. It was all that Steward Liu, seeing that I was naive about such things, secretly embezzled my monthly allowance to line his own pockets. A trace of disdain flickered in Luo Qinghe's eyes. This Han Yingxue is truly a fool. The fact that she wasn't getting her allowance was clearly mother's intent all along. Now that the truth has been exposed, Steward Liu is nothing but a scapegoat. Yet she is foolish enough to actually believe such an explanation. That Steward Liu is certainly bold, to actually dare embezzle the master's own funds. It's fortunate you went to see mother this time. Otherwise, you might have been kept in the dark forever. Indeed, once mother learned that Steward Liu had been embezzling my entire monthly allowance these past few years, she even ordered the accounting office to issue me all the money I was rightfully owed. What? She paid you back for all these years? Luo Qinghe's expression shifted. She had only heard that money was being issued by the accounting office, and she had assumed it was merely for the house repairs. I didn't expect that she would even compensate me for the missing monthly allowances. That's right. Aside from the 3,000 taels for the house repairs, she gave me an additional 12,000 taels of silver. Hearing this, Luo Qinghe could no longer stay seated. She shot up to her feet. 12,000 taels. You are saying mother gave you 12,000 taels of silver in back pay. Realizing she had lost her composure, Luo Qinghe sat back down, looking somewhat awkward. She asked with a feigned expression of confusion, if the monthly allowance is 100 taels, that would be 1,200 taels a year. Even if she paid you back for 4 years, that would only come to a little over 4,000 taels.